Okay, ready to go?
Mm-hmm. For this part of the presentation, we're going to talk about our teacher, our mentor. Her name was Anna Wise, and she was the one who we studied with in order to learn how to use the mind mirror in the most efficient way to get into your mind, into your brain, and to learn how to be in the highest performance possible, and also to get into states of higher consciousness, creativity, and even how to meditate. So we learned from Anna Wise, and it's been about 18 years ago that we studied with her and have been doing her work ever since.
I want to make one thing, one point clear before we start this, 2 points actually. One of them is that we're not teaching another system of meditation. What we're teaching you is how to recognize the brainwave patterns that are involved in meditational states, of which there are many, how to get into higher creativity, how to experience peak experiences, flow states, bliss states, and optimal performance, so that you have high states of creativity, whether you're a musician, a dancer, someone who just works in business, you know, a CEO, even improving your golf game is all involved with your brain waves. Actually, Anna did teach a group of golfers. She said she had 500 golfers in her audience, and she demonstrated it with one of them on stage, and the audience was totally silent as she led them through one of her exercises. So that was pretty amazing.
So what we teach is not related to medical brainwaves or EEGs that you would do for diagnosing specific challenges. It is just for learning how to sensualize, to actually have a felt sense of what each of the brainwaves are doing at any given moment live, so that you can go in there and reproduce those yourself when you want to.
So what we're going to look at now are a series of, let's say, drawings. It's kind of little cartoons. This is what Donna will be doing when you come to a workshop. We'll hook you up, we'll see your brain waves, and Donna will be making notes. And the way she makes notes is she draws a little pattern of what she sees. When she sees an optimal brainwave pattern, she'll make a note on that, and then she'll discuss it with you and give you guidance or advice as to how to improve your state of consciousness.
So we're going to go through each one of the brainwaves now and show you what they would look like on the screen of the mind mirror.
So this is the new Ballistus, the new mind mirror. It's a very compact little unit. Just a quick look at that so you can see how it's evolved. This is the Mind Mirror 6. And it was nominated as one of the top 200 transformational technologies 2 years in a row from Sophia University. Now this is what we see on a mind mirror. The pattern here is if you go up the middle, you're reading the frequencies, and as you go across this way, you're reading the amplitude, or how much energy is in that frequency.
And the line down the middle where the numbers are is showing that place where the bridge between the two hemispheres of the brain is. So when you're looking into this called the mind mirror, is the right side will be looking into the mirror on the right, and the left side of the brain will be looking at the left side of the screen.
So this is low beta. When Donna draws this, you're going to see kind of maybe a flare, a little bit of a head at the top. Beta, this low beta, is from 13 to 20 hertz. And it's the type of beta that we normally want to have. It's the beta that we use when we're in a calm state, when we can think about creativity and solve problems, but it's not a state where you're ruminating, and it's you know, your thoughts don't run away with you. If you go up a little bit faster into the 19 to 23 hertz, it may show that there's some emotional intensity coming up. We don't know what it is, of course, we can't read your minds, but it will show us some of the emotion that may be there, some feeling state. And if you get up into the 24 hertz up to into the 30s, there's sometimes this is called gamma, it's called high, it's called beta 2. So there are different names for this, but usually when you get into this faster gamma or faster brainwave, which goes from about 20 up to 35 hertz, that usually shows, if there's no alpha there, that usually shows that you're ruminating, thinking about something. Your default mode network has kind of run away with you. You may have anxiety, general anxiety disorder, possibly even depression, which would be reflected in the symmetry between the two sides of the brain.
So what we're looking for is a lower amount of the slower beta waves in order to be in a high performance state.
And that comes about by doing the slow, even breathing that we've talked about on another section. And that helps to bring down or to calm down that high beta.
Now, alpha is the area of the brain waves that you see here sort of in the upper 2/3 of the screen. And whenever we're looking at the mind mirror, what we want to see is the amplitude goes out from the center. The wider the amplitude is on the screen, the more power or energy there is coming out of that area of the brain waves. So we're looking for this alpha, which is the pre-consciousness. It's the bridge between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. And it's the one that helps you to feel relaxed and also to use all of your senses.
So if you have 12 hertz, you'll have, or 12 cycles per second, you'll have a feeling of alert readiness. A lot of athletes get into this. It shows intelligence, usually. It's more what we call brightness in brain functioning. It's not necessarily high intelligence, but if your alpha is slower, down in the 8 or 9 hertz range, then you may feel like you don't have, figuratively speaking, all your oars in the water. You may feel a little fuzzy, a little cloudy, not thinking real sharp. But it's also necessary, on the other hand, when you're going into meditation or practicing meditations, to actually drop down into these slower alpha rhythms. So normally, alpha is associated with sensualization, that is being aware of all of your senses. Normally it occurs when you close your eyes. One thing we notice is whether or not that alpha doubles. When you close your eyes, it shows more creative potential. So you may be somebody who's already a writer, a singer, a poet, a musician, someone who's an artist, someone who's involved in creative endeavors, or has the potential of being involved in creative endeavors, whether they've actually taken advantage of it or not. Another thing that we notice about alpha is that if it doesn't come out at all, it may show that there's some underlying emotional trauma that needs to be taken care of or dealt with. And this will be of interest to therapists who are working with a mind mirror and looking at brainwave patterns. We'll go into that more in our workshop.
Theta is the rhythm that we find naturally in young children before the age of 5. And it is the one that is deep in the subconscious, and it's the warehouse where all of the creativity is stored. So we can have it be useful for being able to dip down into theta to find answers to problems and dilemmas, and to find the most creative solution that you wouldn't get if you were only staying in your beta waves.
So the what you might call the lower beta, or lower theta, sorry, or theta, as the case may be, is usually when you get into that low theta, 3 to 5 hertz, you're getting sleepy, but it's also your connection to that energetic field around you, that quantum field appears, or begin to contact that field at the lower theta range. It's also related to delta, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you have a little bit higher thetas, the 6 to 7 hertz, you may be having an internal concentration. You may be focusing on, in meditation, on things that are going on in your own mind, your bodily sensations, maybe even doing some compassion meditations. And is a little bit higher, you have more visualizations, more dreamlike states. You may see swirly patterns. So this is all related to the frequency of the theta. And theta is your subconscious. So you have to have that alpha bridge up there in order to bring this material up into consciousness.
Sometimes when you are deep in your theta waves, you'll be seeing darker colors like blue and indigo and violet. So delta is the one that is what we are born with as babies. Delta is very normal in very young children, and it isn't until they get older that theta and alpha start to emerge. So the one that shows in adult delta, people who have a lot of delta as adults, are those who have the ability for strong empathic feelings and intuitive feelings, or who do energy healing with their hands, or who also feel into listening to information that they get from the larger field. It's an orienting response, which is the one that helps to check to see if there's anything unusual going on or seeking out novelty. And it's also very normal to have more delta with your eyes open. That we see that a lot, and especially in people who are healers or who have a strong healing capacity.
So there is a normal delta. Sometimes if there's been a brain injury, there may be a focal point of delta that doesn't change. And this is a clinical diagnosis that we are not concerned with or not looking for in the delta. That orienting response comes up through theta and into alpha and into your waking mind, into beta. But sometimes if you don't have a good connection between the alpha and the theta, and you just have the beta and you have some delta down there, you may walk into a room and get a feeling of something's not quite right, but you don't know exactly what it is. So it's kind of feeling as they say, feeling the vibes, feeling what's going on around you. So these will be some of the drawings that you'll see what Donna does in the workshop, and she'll discuss that in more detail with you. Now, gamma, this is a picture of what we see on the mind mirror. And the gamma is the higher frequency, which Anna wasn't able to monitor. She didn't have that. Neither Max, Kate, or Anna were able to monitor the gamma. Gamma starts at about 30 hertz. Some people say 25 hertz, and goes up to 90 to 100 hertz, which we can measure here. And there are more, let's say, machines that are used in universities and medical settings that can actually monitor even higher frequencies than that. So gamma is related to focused attention. It's also related to laying down your memory, a working memory, and your long-term memories. And it's considered to be a possible correlate of consciousness. So what we see, if you're looking at, say, if you're familiar with lucid dreaming, what we see is in the dream state, which is another different type of brainwave pattern. And again, we'll discuss the differences in brainwave patterns in the workshop. But in the dream state, we have a specific type of brainwave pattern. And what they find is when people go into lucid dreaming, that they have an increase of gamma, and particularly on the right frontal lobes. This is, unfortunately, no one's been able to actually develop a neural feedback system for this yet that's effective. And one of these days, we'll be able to just hook ourselves up at night and go into a lucid dream, which should be a lot of fun.
So gamma is always riding on top of the theta and the delta. So the theta and the delta go very slowly, and then the gamma is very fast. So it's going on top of the slower wave, and it's making all of the networks of the brain hook up together.
Now, when someone is doing Zazen, just sitting, this is a typical sort of pattern you might see, that the beta, that sort of flat lines up there, the beta has reduced considerably in amplitude. So it doesn't look like anything's happening there. However, you do still have the beta. And then you have more of the alpha, and you have the theta, and you may or may not have some delta coming out. So this will be similar to the sorts of patterns that Donna will draw and will show you in the workshops and discuss with you. This is what it looks like on a mind mirror. And you can see this doesn't go up into the gamma range on this picture, but you can see those sort of yellow, gold, mustardy color are alpha. The red is the beta. The blue is your theta. And the green down below is at the very bottom, starting from 3 and going down, would be your delta. Now, this is what we look for, ideally, and what we're training for is to get you into this, what's called awakened mind pattern. This pattern is a gateway into flow, into bliss states, into creativity, into personal transformation, and it underlies just about everything that you would want to do in terms of creativity and higher performance.
So it is called the integral awakened mind, and it can often have a little bit of gamma above that round part of the what looks like the head, and there can be some gamma above that too in some cases. And so that awakened mind state, in that state, the mind is clearer and sharper and quicker and more flexible than in the ordinary states that we walk around. And the whole reason why we do the training is so that our thinking can become more fluid rather than rigid, and our emotions can become more available and understandable and easier to work with and transform anything that needs transforming.
So you can see what you have here is basically that meditation pattern, but with some beta added back at the top. Max Cade was the first to identify this. He had monitored something like 4,000 people during his lifetime, and Anna had subsequently monitored probably another 10,000 people from all walks of life, all sense of creativity, everything from your man in the street to, you know, Qigong masters to Sufis, even some horses and giraffes. So she had a pretty good, clear idea of what the brainwave patterns look like. And this was that the pattern that seemed to be associated or correlated with those optimal states that we would all like to be in. And so what we're looking at, we might call the brainwave correlates of consciousness. So in this state, information flows more easily between the subconscious, which you can see as theta, into the preconscious, and into consciousness. So it comes up from delta through theta, through alpha, and into beta. And that gives you intuition, insight, increases in empathy. You have a better sense of what's going on around you, become more integrated into your normal consciousness. What we want to do is to achieve mastery so that we can go into and out of the states that we need to be in, depending on what we're doing and what we're engaged in. Now, when we look at the brainwave patterns, what we see is, you can see the yellow is your alpha, and down in the blue, down there at about 6 to 5 hertz, you see a little flare that's coming out that's bigger than the alpha. And then at the top, the red, which is your beta, particularly up in the 38 and 30 hertz range, is larger. And this indicates that there may be some emotional content coming up into consciousness. And this is what a therapist would be interested in looking at as they're discussing things with their client. They would be watching what's happening with theta and beta, and what's happening with the alpha, whether the alpha is expanding out or contracting, looking at these different patterns. So if they begin discussing, you know, mom or dad, and all of a sudden they're getting these huge flares of beta and they're getting a huge flare of theta, and the person is not quite sure what it is that they should be talking about, the therapist can say, okay, let's concentrate a little bit more on mom there and talk about that a little bit more.
So when I'm doing something as a private session with a client and I am talking about something that I'm trying to help them with clearing or transforming, if I see those blue lines, the theta, expand out and just get really big, then that is the place where I know that the mind mirror is telling me to look deeper. Interestingly enough, when you're doing energy work, that theta will respond quite quickly. And so EFT tapping or healing with your hands or any type of energy work like muscle testing will show a change that happens instantly in the theta rhythms. It's very sensitive.
Now, this is what we call a theta crossover. What you're seeing in the blue is that blue theta has gotten larger than the alpha. And what you want to do is maintain that theta amplitude a little bit bigger than the alpha. And you don't want the person to go to sleep. But this begins to give you what they call a theta crossover. And this means that emotional material will come more easily and more readily into consciousness, particularly if you're working as a therapist with addictions, or trauma. This is a way of accessing it. And this was initially observed with what was called the Peniston protocol. Dr. Peniston and Kalowski developed this technique. Actually, Anna and Max Cade had seen it, but since they were concerned with higher states of consciousness and not so much with doing therapy, they didn't really pursue it the way Peniston did. So what you want to do if you're working it therapeutically is that you want to relax the person, take them down into an alpha theta state, allow them to develop theta, which needs to be at least one microvolt larger than the alpha, and to hold it there for at least 3 minutes. 10 minutes is even better. And also maintain that low beta, particularly the 15 to 19 hertz in there, at about 4 microvolts. If it gets any smaller than that, the person may be falling asleep. So from therapeutic point of view, this is a very advantageous way of working with things. They found working with alcoholics and people with addictions, if they have the theta crossovers and they access material which is subconscious for them, it brings up that emotional content, and then you begin to clear that. You can use tapping or EMDR or any other techniques that are useful that you're trained in, and that helps to resolve these issues very quickly. And in subsequent studies, they found that people that went through the theta crossover did not tend to return to alcoholism or to addictions or to the emotional issues that they had before, primarily because they're doing something called memory reconsolidation, which Peniston and Kalowski had no knowledge of at the time, but subsequently we know that that's probably involved in what's working with this theta crossover.
So what happens after at least 3 minutes of having a larger theta than the alpha and keeping it in a configuration like we're seeing here on this slide, is that for about 3 hours afterwards, it's possible to have reframing where all of the different beliefs can be reset, and it's like getting your whole brain rebooted and rewired.
So as you begin to go into those theta crossover states, as you deepen into that, the first thing that you'll experience, and this most people will experience this just as they're falling asleep. This is called hypnagogic imagery. You'll have intense colors, geometric patterns, maybe little snippets of images will come up. You may hear sounds. You become very sensitive to sounds. If you're kind of drifting and you think you're still awake, and yet somebody claps their hands or there's a loud sound, and all of a sudden it sounds like somebody just shot off a gun and startles you. You may have been in that hypnagogic imagery. So it tends to be more pleasant, more sort of beautiful or comical or magical. Someone said, it's a swirly imagery, sounds like voices, rivers, crystal caves. And we will take you initially into this type of hypnagogic imagery to take you down into an alpha-theta state so that you begin to feel what it's like without falling asleep. And that will be part of the first part of the project in the Awakened Mind training.
And in this state also, mystical experiences can often happen where you see beings or images of people who are no longer with us, or someone comes to you from another place and gives you messages. So it can be quite mysterious.
And that happens as you fall deeper into, you get more of a theta stabilized, you get more alpha. And so at that point, in these theta crossover states, you get more important memories, emotional problems, or unresolved conflicts may come into consciousness, health issues that you may need to deal with, feelings of abandonment, separation anxiety, and you may even have physical sensations as you drop down into these difficulties with breathing, nausea, rapid heartbeat. You may become more conscious of what's going on in your body. And this is a state which we call stage 4 of meditation techniques. And as people begin to drop down into this alpha-theta crossover state, and they begin to have these images and memories and physical sensations come up, they're startled and worried, and they pull themselves immediately out of any sort of meditation practice. So what they need to do, what you need to do, is realize that you're actually getting into a deeper state, one that can be highly creative, highly therapeutic, and you can utilize that for many, many different reasons. So Stanislaw Grof, who was a student of Freud and actually was one of the first to begin working with LSD therapy, identified something like 32 different, what he called non-ordinary states. And one of the first that he began to identify, being a Freudian, it's not surprising, he began to look at the birth process. And so he broke it down into 4 stages, 1, 2, 3, and 4, depending on the stage that you were in the process of birth, whether you were still interuterine, whether or not you're going through contractions, moving down the birth canal, or actually when you are born. So people, when they get into these deeper alpha-theta states and they have increasing delta, because remember, delta is what very young children are in. So all of those memories were laid down sort of state-dependent learning in delta. This is why it's difficult for us to actually begin to remember without some practice our first year or 2 of life and our birth. And there's been a lot of discussion as to whether or not you can actually remember your birth, but people do,
Yes.
believe me. So this, someone commented here, I saw myself being born, and it felt actual, like he was actually being born again. People with using holotropic breath work will have similar sorts of experiences, going through shamanic experiences, actually doing shamanic entheogens will also bring about similar sorts of experiences. And so the transcendental states that people go through You might be able to remember your ancestors. You might have some archetypal imagery. You might have past life imagery. You might feel yourself merging with the animal life or the plant life around you. There will be time distortions. You may feel like everything is timeless, or that you're not even in space anymore. The sense of time and space will greatly diminish sometimes. You may sort of expand beyond your sense of self. Your sense of self may begin to drop away. And this is related to what we call non-dual awareness. People have this type of experience as well. And it becomes, in non-dual consciousness, it becomes a permanent state. You may also see deceased ancestors. You can contact your archetypal guides, people who come to you that you can call up that will give you guidance, angels. So this is not unusual in this deeper state of transpersonal consciousness. You may have out-of-body experiences. Many people have been working on this, say at the Monroe Institute, have developed techniques for helping you to get into out-of-body experiences. You may be feeling becoming one with all of creation, expanding out to, feeling all of the universe.
And often, after having an experience like this, you never go back to the way you felt before. A lot of times people have life-changing, transformational experiences that they never feel like they compress down to what they were like before this experience.
So this has been found in therapy, particularly in the alpha-theta crossover techniques, is that the more you can experience these transpersonal states, the more rapidly you recover from whatever emotional issues you may have had. You have better outcomes and faster outcomes. So this is the awakened mind pattern, as we would see it on the mind mirror. And at the very top, which is not shown on this particular image, would be gamma. And that's your focused attention again. And then the alpha is the sort of brownish, orangish color. I'm not quite sure what to label that color. And then your theta is in the blue, and your delta is down in the green.
And the red is actually mostly beta. And beta is the one that is good to have a little bit of, the lower beta, and to have it reduced so that it doesn't take up the amplitude of the whole screen, and then have the alpha be what brings it out clear almost to the edges. And then theta and delta can be however your personal pattern is. What's very interesting is to be able to see all of these moving in real time, which they're changing dynamically all the time. So when you see these little slides and snapshots, this is where we just caught it in a certain moment of time. But usually when we're seeing the monitors going on where the person has their little electrodes on their head, it'll be moving all the time, and we just catch the average of what it looks like and draw the picture, and we have methods of being able to capture those for future reference.
And most everybody will have an awakened mind pattern. It's just that we don't recognize it when it occurs, and it may only last for a few moments. And so what our objective is to begin to get you to become aware of the moments that you have these patterns, that the awakened mind develops, and that you can go back to it whenever you need to. And what I said before is that we're not teaching a form of meditation, but we're teaching a gateway of the sort of mechanics of the brain, of the alpha rhythms and the beta rhythms and all of the other brain rhythms, and how to use them so that you can go into whatever bliss state or optimal state or peak state or flow state that you would want to be in.
For all kinds of reasons, everything you can imagine is better when you are able to access all of the brain waves at the same time, along with really healthy heart rhythms and heart coherence, all together with all the autonomic nervous system working together, is where you can be in the highest performance and the most happy and healthy.
And finally, we've discussed a little bit in one of the other presentations, is that this is sort of an optimal pattern. There is no obstruction between your unconscious, subconscious, preconscious, subconscious mind, and you would even have gamma above this that would be flaring out as well.
So it could be a circle with a little bubble up on the top of it would be the evolved mind circular pattern that you're seeing a picture of here with the extra gamma up on top.
So when we see people get into this particular pattern, we know that they've arrived. They've gone into a core state, so to speak, and they have it's a state of kind of beingness. They don't feel like they have to do anything. They don't have to know anything. They don't have to relate. It's just a state of being. It includes a sense that nothing else needs to be done. A sense of unconditional love is often involved with this, of oneness with the universe. Great feelings of serenity and peace will come over you. You may not have any specific emotion, but it's more of a blissful state, often an expansive feeling of loving kindness for all. And this is a pattern that we can develop. We have specific techniques and tools to do this. So it can be life-changing when you experience this. If you're working therapeutically and you drop into this particular pattern, all of the issues, the emotional issues, will just be transformed completely. And it will be like they're not there.
And my favorite word for this pattern is called the bliss ball because it's a big ball.
So when we see somebody sitting there with a goofy grin on their face and tears rolling down their cheeks, we generally know that they've gone into this particular state.
Especially if they happen to be hooked up and we see it on the monitor.
So this is the end of this presentation. And hopefully we'll see you in one of our workshops in the near future.
Thank you.
So that you can have your brainwaves hooked up and we can actually see what's happening.
Thanks for watching.